We're going to talk about resilience today. And in particular, what are we doing in our roles when we feel like students or see students shut down when things get hard? Task gets hard, problems get hard, thinking gets hard. What are we seeing quitting? Are we seeing abandonment? This loss of like engagement because all of a sudden it gets tough, and tough is, that just hurts my brain, so I want to turn it off. What are we doing to promote resilience, productive struggle in our classrooms? What are we doing as teachers because I think we all want that. Every time, I'll be honest, every time we meet with a team at a district or a school and we say, what do you want to see in your classrooms? And that's one of the things that they'll say. They want resilience and productive struggle. They want thinking happening at the forefront. And we agree. Like, we want that too. The hard part is, how do we make that happen? And how do we make that happen as a teacher? How do we make that happen as a coach or coordinator? Like, how do we promote that in our classrooms when maybe we're not seeing it and we know we're not seeing it? So that's what we want to talk about here today. We want to talk about what can we do for teachers in that way, but also what can we do in the leadership role to address resilience in the math classroom.
My goodness, this is a tough one because, when you think about all aspects of life, right? Challenge is not something that people are like, out of the box wanting, like we usually want to take the easy route, right? Yeah. Like we're always looking for the easy route. But then when you specifically look at numeracy and then you think of some of the actions all the way to when kids are young and they're in their own household, like I'll never forget the experience that, one of my we'll call it one of the grandparents in our family. Basically, this was years ago when the kids were really young. They asked them a math problem, like a simple addition problem. And at the time, we're talking like the kids are 3 or 4 years old and, they use their fingers to count. And he made a big deal about it because the old school mentality was like, no, you don't use your fingers. Like if you know the math and it's like in your head, you know the answer. And essentially like kind of shamed, one of the kids. And we had to have like an explicit conversation about that, how like, no, we're actually exploring, trying to get them to use their fingers as manipulatives and, really trying to explain things. So I just want you to kind of imagine all of the kids that come into our school system and we don't know what experiences they've had in their own homes, whether they talk about math and numbers or what matters and what's important. But then you also think about what we do in our math classrooms and how there's such a overemphasis on the answer that students over time sort of recognize that, if you know the answer and typically if you can do it faster than someone else, like that means like you're better, and that unfortunately is what limits students in wanting to even like take that chance, because oftentimes when things get hard, that's like a signal to them in their brain that like, I don't know the answer and therefore I'm out. And that's something that we have to be very, very cautious and aware of in our classroom. And we have to be very explicit about making sure that we squeeze that out.
Well, yeah, I think what you're saying is that we have to take a look at our classroom and go, what culture am I promoting in this room about perseverance, about resilience? Am I still putting the emphasis on speed? Am I still putting the emphasis on accuracy above thinking, above struggle? These are important things to consider. Like what are the words that I say during my lessons, and maybe I'm working with a student one-on-one. What are the things I'm doing in that environment to creating that? What does that situation look like? So that am I perpetuating this idea of explicit teaching is what math is really, and speed and accuracy is what math is all about. Whereas I think what you're saying is a different definition of what we're doing here in math class is using our brains to struggle through problems, to come up with strategies and solutions to maybe novel problems. And how do we do more of that in our classroom?
Yeah, and I'd like to add just a little bit to what both Kyle and John said there about focusing on the answer so much and focusing on speed. I think we also, as educators, have to be careful when we focus on just one strategy or path to get that answer as well. Because you might end up in a situation where a student is calculating in their head, maybe in a slightly different way from what's being presented in the classroom. They're getting that answer, But because the emphasis is on doing it the teacher's way, that students still might shut down and might not contribute to the class discussion because they feel like even though they got the answer, they didn't get it. They didn't see it the way that everybody else is seeing it in the classroom. So I think we have to be careful with that too. And we have to embrace and encourage those flexible thinking strategies to help all students feel like they belong in the classroom.
Sounds to me like we're trying to describe, redefining what we value. And so what students perceive being good at math means. So like my son right now, I struggle with him all the time because he does have strong math aptitude. If you define it as he's able to get answers relatively quickly with not a lot of, struggle. But that's not how I define being good at math. I love the Dan Finkel video around productive struggle where he talks about can we define math as being how long you're willing to commit to a problem? Like, how long are you willing to see it through without abandoning? Right? Like, it's very easy, even as adults, to come across a challenging math problem and just walk away from it if it feels too challenging. But really great mathematicians are going to be, it's going to pique their interest. They're going to be frustrated until they find out because they're so curious to know how it works and what the relationships are. And that really is the definition of a strong mathematician, is your willingness to stick with a problem that does present a cognitive demand.
It's almost like teaching kids, but also adults, like teaching us how to be humble, right? In terms of we don't know the answer. And I think a lot of people, especially adults, are willing to say, I don't know everything, right? Like that seems obvious. But when it comes down to it, when we get put in a tough spot and we're not sure of where to go next, specifically when we're talking about a math problem, it's a lot easier to just sort of give up. And I think it is built into us even as adults in that, over time we've sort of recognized that, it doesn't feel too good when you're stumped and when you feel like maybe I don't quote unquote know what I'm doing. And we've really got to work to try to help students feel like that's kind of why we're here. Like, this is what we're supposed to be doing in this class. It's not so that you can all just spit out answers as fast as possible without even thinking. Like, automaticity is fantastic. We love it. It's really helpful so that you don't have to bog your thinking down on the hard problem you're trying to solve, right? Like, that's the purpose of the automaticity, is so it can help you think through tough problems and not sort of, throw you into cognitive overload when you're trying to work through something that's difficult.
Right. And to build on that idea of cognitive overload, Kyle, I was just talking with a group of teachers yesterday about persistence and perseverance and building the keep with itness in the students. And one question that I asked them to really think about was, as an adult, under what circumstances, when you were learning something new, did you just want to walk away and give up? And then also think about, under what circumstances when you were learning something new, did you really want to figure it out? Did you feel like you could? And I think outside of math class, even, I think everyone would say that the times that they wanted to just walk away and give up was when they had absolutely no connection to anything they were learning, or they didn't have any sort of a foundational understanding of what they were about to jump into. And so I think that can easily translate into the classroom. How do we position students to really want to keep digging in and keep trying? Well, they have to have some strong foundational skills. They have to have some sort of reference to be able to say, oh, well, this is kind of like this. And so I wonder if this might work.
They have to be curious.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But we also have to make sure that they have that foundation. They have to have something to build off of.
Yeah.
And I think if we in the classrooms can help students to see connections where connections lie, then it builds that curiosity that you just mentioned, John, right? It's like, is this kind of like what we did yesterday or a month ago or last year in class? And so it gives them a place to start.
I think what you're talking about, Beth, is access, and making sure that the tasks that's the difference between productive struggle versus unproductive struggle. Right? If I put a task in front of a student or an adult that is not accessible, that's not productive, right? So that's that idea of like, I have to ensure that they have the foundational knowledge for access. They have to have past experiences that they can connect to. There needs to be some scaffolding in place so that it's within that zone of proximal development where they're struggling and it's challenging and they're making new connections, but there's access, right? Like not having an access point to the problem is frustration. And that's day after day. If that's your experience in the math class, is that you don't have access, you're going to be very unlikely to want to take risks.
Right. Yeah.
Absolutely. And also talking about access through having strong foundations, but also access through understanding how to use different math tools in the classroom, right? So, having a tool, maybe I don't know the answer to this, but, as an adult, we might have some tools we can fall back on. I can do an internet search. I can watch a YouTube video. And so in the math classroom, I think we also have to think about the tools that we're teaching students to use so that they can pull from those tools when something gets challenging.
Yeah. Like sometimes what I tend to think about is when we talk about resilience, we talk about productive struggle. When I was, in my classroom, I always taught it like it was one of the core competencies. Taught it like it was a curriculum expectation. It was one of our core principles at the beginning of the year that we unpacked to say, this is what it's going to look like in the classroom. And then we were held accountable to that throughout the year. For the first month, I think a month and a half, at the end of every day, our exit ticket had a scale on it that said, like, where do you lie on your perseverance today? Like, were you perseverant in this way, or were you perseverant in this way? And we built the metacognition right into it, because what we needed the students to realize is when do I see myself productively struggling, and when do I see myself unproductively struggling? But also, when am I not struggling at all, or when am I not using thinking? And so we wanted to teach it. We wanted to say, where do you see this today? Like, where was it today that happened, and how did you feel like self-assessment on the scale? Because we developed that continuum in the first few days of like, what is perseverance, and what is it not, and what does it look like, and what does it not look like? Like, this is an important component of just, structuring your culture to be about that, but don't leave it to chance, like make it part of the curriculum you're teaching.
That's such helpful information, like, especially for someone who's thinking like, oh, maybe I haven't spent enough time explicitly bringing that up in my classroom. Like, I want to sort of shift things towards our coaches, our coordinators, our leaders who are listening right now. And how might we help to support them in supporting the educators they're working with? Of course, there has to be an awareness. I'm sure, everyone's recognizing that, but what might be some moves that they might be able to make in their positions so that the educators that they're serving are able to better bring out that productive struggle in their classrooms and promote students with that stick-to-itiveness, as Beth had mentioned earlier in the episode?
I'm imagining, I'm coaching a teacher, and the barrier that they're saying is, well, I have to pre-teach, or I can't give a performance task, or I can't do a task-based lesson, or if they haven't been explicitly scaffolded, they can't. It's like they can't, because they're going to shut down. They don't have the skills. They don't want to persevere when it gets challenging. And so I'm imagining that's what I'm hearing. But I'm a coach who's trying to say, no, students need to be doing the thinking. Students need to understand that what it means to be good at math is to productively struggle through challenging problems. So I guess what Kyle's asking us is, what is our advice to that coach? And I'm almost stumped right now, because I feel like it's a big one. Okay, I want to say that my first advice would be, let's just try it. But the problem is, the first time it's not going to be great, right? Like, it's like, if we don't create a culture, right, where over time it's like, this is the culture of our classroom. And like I said to you, like, in my room, the quote on the board was, easy is a waste of time. And I always told my kids, like, I value you too much to waste your time in here. So like, I'm not going to give you things that are easy, because you're not going to learn from that. You're not going to benefit from that. And I know how capable you are. And I think it starts with like belief about what students are capable of, and that they can rise to the occasion, if, like Beth said, we have the foundation in place.
Well, and I think, like, if we kind of think about, John had shared what he was doing in his own classroom as a classroom teacher. And I mean, obviously there's a bunch that we can learn from that, and we can take the same thinking and apply it when we're working with educators, right? So like those same pillars have to be true in our professional development sessions. And I would argue that when we're delivering PD, we also have to bring out this perseverance in our educators. Because oftentimes the limitation, like one of the limitations they have, is the fact that they too are also in a similar position where, you know, we're a little bit afraid to make a mistake. We're a little bit, you know, scared that we might not know the answer right away. And I think, you know, we talk about this on the show all the time, is like by doing the math with our educators when we're in PD sessions, that is an opportunity for us to help drive home that point every single time we come together. And one of the moves that I think is really important, this works in the classroom, but it also works in PD, is that with educators, when we're doing the math, starting with getting people the notice and wonder and the estimating, making predictions, like I feel like that aspect, we used to talk about it all the time when we were focused on the actual lessons that we'd teach in a classroom. These are important moves for us to be doing with the educators we're working with, so that everybody is on an equal playing field, right? When there is no answer to be, you know, shout out or to be shared, and that we're all starting from estimation, from predicting, from sharing what we notice, sharing what we wonder, it really brings down your guard, and then slowly giving them more information as we do this mathematics. So I think it's really important. It's easy to forget when we say doing the math with our educators, we don't necessarily mean just chuck up a problem up on the board and let's all do it together. It's like, let's actually do this in the way that we would want to do it with students. And that also provides a little bit of a pathway so that they can be more open to sharing what they're thinking, and then also slowly upping the level or upping the ceiling on the problem so that we increase that productive struggle as they go. And I think as you experience it yourself and you have those epiphanies, those math epiphanies, you also get the pedagogical epiphany when you go, oh my gosh, if I lead problems in this way on a regular basis, I give all the students in my classroom an opportunity to participate. Yeah. And then hopefully we've got that sunk going on there where they put enough effort into it, where now they're kind of like, we've suckered them into wanting to actually find out the answer and actually trying to figure things out.
Yeah. Like we don't make shifts in our habits by data or by like rationale, you know, like it's we make shifts in our habits because of emotion and experience that we've had. And what you're saying, Kyle, is if you really want to teach productive struggle to teachers, you have to make them also have the experience of what that feels like and sounds like. Like the same is true in with the students, right? Like if I'm going to teach problem solving, I'm not going to just teach, here are the 4 steps of problem solving, and we put the framework in place and we fill out this template. You know, use a highlighter, and that's going to solve all the problems that you're ever going to come across. No, like teaching problems is putting kids in experiences they don't know how to solve, and then guiding them through that and slowly kind of scaffolding. The same is true for educators. They have to experience that because we didn't come through a system that taught problem solving in that way. Therefore, we don't know it. Like we don't know. Like we don't know resilience of what that looks like in the classroom, and we also have to experience it. We have to provide those experiences. Otherwise, we're not going to see it. We have to make sure that the administration knows what these experiences should look like, sound like, so that we can all work together to coordinate an effort to like make this part of the program that we're trying to deliver. There's a lot of pieces to this, you know, but you're right. It does start with experience, and it starts with emotional attachment to like, that's what I'm trying to do here. Oh, I get it now. Like that's what you're looking for when you're creating experiences for educators, to like them go, because the perfect experience is for them to go like, oh, I get, I wonder what this now looks like for me. You know, like, oh, because now they've bought in, but now they're like going to be more specific. And now that's where your specific support has to come in. Like your layers of support have to be there if you have a hope of translating that into the classroom for a teacher who's never experienced or has never taught with productive struggle. So there's a lot of elements there that we have to unpack, but it does start with that belief, and that belief is through experience.
Sure. And I think as a coach, I think we also need to make sure that the teachers that we're supporting feel like it's okay to take a risk, and to try something different, because shifting the culture in your classroom from one that, quick answers to one that really they dig in and they want to solve problems, it takes time.
Mm-hmm.
Especially if students have been in a system for a while where if they don't quite know the answer, they don't have to take that risk. If they just wait long enough, the teacher's going to walk by and tell them the answer.
Right.
Or someone else, those top 3 students are going to raise their hand and they're going to tell us how to solve it. And so I don't really have to think anymore. It does take time. And so when you're asking a teacher to shift to this model where you're not going to give the answer right away, you are going to, add that wait time in. You might not get through a lesson. The lesson might completely fail. And teachers need to feel safe to be able to do that and to take the time, as a coach, to support teachers and say, hey, you know what? It might take you a week to get through this one lesson this first time, because we're really changing the way that we're asking students to engage in problem solving in our classrooms. And it does take time, because there's a lot of learned behaviors that students have. They're coming in with a lot of baggage from previous years of sitting in math classes where they didn't have to think.
Right, right. And these are habits, right? So like if we kind of summarize some of what we've discussed is, if we go all the way back to the top of the episode and we think about like students before they even come to us, the messages that they've been taught, the things that they've learned along the way, these are built in, like these are neural pathways now in our brains. Like we feel a certain way when certain things happen. And therefore it is going to take time. We have to actually nurture this in our classroom and really try to make sure that we're explicit about what it means to be good at math. And this can be really challenging, especially if across our school or across our district, if different classrooms have a different opinion of what it means to be good at math. So we have to get clear on that vision. When we're working with our educators, so as leaders out there, if you're a coordinator, coach, consultant, we need to make sure that we're modeling this with our educators, because once again, we can't just say to the other teachers in our system, make kids more perseverant, make perseverance a thing in our classroom. Like oftentimes as adults, like we need to work on our own understanding of what it means to be to persevere and what it means to stick with different math problems. So we want to make sure that we position them as learners so that they can have their own epiphanies. And only once it's productive is once we've laid that foundation. Ultimately, like we need to make sure that this productive struggle is taking place and that we're recognizing what it means to do a true productive struggle. And once again, I think that comes back to us doing the math with each other as adults so that we get a sense of what that might look like and sound like when we try to do the same thing in our own classrooms.
Great summary there, Kyle, for sure. If this is the work that we do on a regular basis, is that, like I said at the top of the episode, is that, when we partner with schools and school districts, when we talk about what is the vision for math, what does it look like in our classrooms? What do we want to look like in our classrooms 5, 10 years from now? Every one of those conversations has an element of productive struggle and making that part of our regular classroom experience for our students. So we've got to, this is we work with teams to make this happen. And if you're wondering, if you're on the right pathway to trying to make this happen, you want some guidance, you want some tips, then we would love to meet with you and chat about this and hear your situation and give you some next steps. You can do that by booking a call with us. Head on over to makemathmoments.com/district. Click a link there, book a call, and we can be talking about what this looks like for you and for your schools and your school district.